them, not the worst parts, the best parts. This is the best of the rest.
Hello, and what is a Game Boy? This is Best of the Rest, the show where we take a second look at comic book movies that were poorly received upon release, but only talk about the things we like and what the movie does well. It's sometimes a challenge, but always a good time. And this week, we are talking Men in Black 2. My name is Chris Logan, and I am joined, as always, by the comic book loving alien, Andrew Williams. You ready to talk some MIB 2, Andrew?
I am, yes.
Did you see this movie in theaters? Do you remember seeing it in theaters?
Yes, I actually do remember seeing this in theaters because I was surprised at how short it was.
Insanely short movie, under 90 minutes.
That's 88 minutes with credits, which
Crazy.
always just surprised me. But yeah, because I remember we went to the theater at like 1 o'clock and we were out before 3 o'clock. And I was like, wow, because even with like other movies, I always expected to be at like 2 hours plus, but I was surprised. But yeah,
You get that weird feeling when you walk out of the theaters and it's sunlight still. It's like, this isn't right.
Yeah, this is not right. This is incorrect. I don't like it. And it's too bright.
I saw this in theaters. I don't remember it too vividly. I just know that I did see it in theaters and had my opinion about it. It's not one I revisited very much. A huge fan of the first movie.
Oh, of course.
One of the best movies of the 90s, like hands down. Like most people, like we're going to talk about, just wasn't as enthusiastic about the second movie. An oddly large gap, 5 years between the two of them, which is a little strange considering how big of a hit that first movie was. You'd expect a 2 or 3 year turnaround, but look, there's a few issues getting this one out, but it finally releases July 3rd, 2002 on a budget of $140 million. That is not a cheap movie, but it more than makes its money back. $442 million at the box office. Pretty big hit. However, critically, not nearly as well regarded as the first movie. Just a 39% on Rotten Tomatoes. And as far as the audience reaction, more of a whimper is kind of what I remember. People didn't care for the movie too much and really just didn't talk about it.
No, yeah. It's one of those movies that I think definitely the delay is part of it. Because like you said, Men in Black was like peak. That's Will Smith at like the peak of his powers. Tommy Lee Jones at that point was obviously a huge bankable name. And so it made a lot of waves. People were pretty hyped about it. The song obviously was everywhere. And then this takes 5 years to come out. And I think by then, I think most of the anticipation probably would have gone away as far as people that were like, oh yeah, give us more. I think by that point, everyone was kind of like moved beyond it. And then it happens again with the sequel. MIB 3 takes like 10 years after this to come out. So like, this is just not a franchise that seems to have time on its mind, which, you know, take your time. I get it. But yeah, it definitely just kind of comes and goes. I just don't think it really makes any real impression on anybody.
Worth noting, this is less than a year after 9/11, which is one reason for the delay. I do believe they removed some scenes as well. So probably a reason that's a little bit shorter, but just a strange time to be like, hey, let's go back to that thing we loved before. Just an odd time for America altogether.
Yeah, definitely.
I have always wondered how Men in Black didn't become like the new Ghostbusters, like the Ghostbusters of the 90s. Because Ghostbusters, huge hit in the 80s, and it transcends movies, right? It's a pop culture touchstone. There's lunchboxes, animated show. Kids know it, but kids today have never seen Ghostbusters, but they know who you're going to call Ghostbusters. Right. It's just part of American culture. And I feel like that first movie was that big. It's like Ghostbusters, but instead of ghosts, it's aliens. And it's just fun world. You can dress up as these characters. They've got cool gadgets. And it looked like it would really take off as like a media franchise. And it just doesn't. And I don't really know why. Maybe it was the large gap before we got the second one, but even Ghostbusters didn't really need that second movie. Like people like the second movie, but it's not like it took it to a new level. It's all about that first movie with Ghostbusters. Men in Black never quite reached that, even though, I mean, I'm a Men in Black guy growing up. Men in Black kid, I should say. I was a Men in Black kid growing up. I mean, this was the movie for me.
I think part of it, I do agree. I think Men in Black, like people talk about things that were, capable of becoming that next hit. I think Men in Black really is, because if there's a kind of apropos line, I kind of feel like it's Ghostbusters. The setups are different, but you're looking at a film that has a likable cast that catches on, makes an impression. People go and see it. I think part of it, one, is Ghostbusters, I feel, was far more heavily merchandised. I think kids, when Ghostbusters was coming out, saw those toys. That show translated immensely to like action figures stuff. I don't think Men in Black translated as well to that, simply because there just wasn't really as much of it. But it is odd that it kind of comes out, makes such an impression, and then doesn't seem to like catch. I know there was an animated series for Men in Black. I know that was
I do remember that, but didn't really seem to take off. But you're right about merchandising. I mean, Ghostbusters had, Slimer ectoplasm, like his own drink. We didn't have Mikey from the first movie with his own line of snacks or drinks or whatever.
There was no Worms Folgers tie-in coffee. So
what a huge missed opportunity, though.
Yeah, I mean, if you want to get people interested in drinking coffee, attach an alien worms to it is definitely the way to do it.
So, of course, what we're going to do is talk about Men in Black 2, but only focus on the positives, because that's what our show is all about. We look at movies that were initially received poorly, which means most of the conversations about them focus on the negatives. And so we try to do the reverse of that. We dig through these movies and find out what works and focus on that, because we are, of course, a #positivity podcast. Now, typically we cover superhero movies, but since the beginning, it's been comic book adaptations. We covered Judge Dredd pretty early on. I don't think most people would call Judge Dredd a superhero. Andrew, are the Men in Black superheroes?
No.
What is a superhero? So. How would you define a superhero, Andrew?
I don't know. I guess technically they would be superheroes. Like, because if you're going by the loose definition of what they do, superheroes also do that.
So a hero is someone who does good and protects his fellow man. That's probably the most basic definition of a hero, right?
Right.
And a superhero just has abilities that most people don't have to do that. That's the Men in Black.
Yeah.
Are the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle superheroes?
I'm sure by that definition, yes, they are superheroes.
I mean, you don't have to be human, right? Because Superman, he's an alien, but he is a superhero.
Oh, no, yeah. I would never say that, the turtles is not them being turtles is not the disqualifying factor. It would just be whether or not how they function counts them as a superhero. But, Batman's just a ninja, basically. That's, he's a superhero. Why not them?
Just a ninja. He's the world's greatest detective, Andrew.
Aren't all ninjas detectives?
Wait, is Sherlock Holmes a superhero?
Chris, we're going to go task.
Okay. All right. Men in Black 2. And so before we jump into it, one thing I do want to say, I think we should, most conversations about this movie inevitably are comparing it to the first movie.
Right.
That's not fair for a few reasons. But one, that first, it's so good. It would be so hard to match the quality of that first movie. And I think we need to look at this kind of on its own merit. So I think we should do our best throughout this conversation to not try to relate things back to that first movie, because I don't think it's doing the second movie any favors. I just think it's a fair way to do that.
Yeah, I agree. And I considered watching the first one back to back with this one, but I ended up not doing that.
I did the same thing. Yeah, I was like,
oh, I could watch both of them, get it. But I was like, but if I watch the first one and then I watch this one, I'm going to have that line in my head and I'm going to fall into the trap of being like, it doesn't do X, Y, and Z like the original does. And, that's, it's back to Ghostbusters. It's the same kind of thing. It's like when you watch Ghostbusters 2 in the light of the first one, there's definitely criticisms to be made. But no, I ended up just dialing into this one specifically. I was like, you know what? Just focus on this one. Like, I remember the first one. I've seen it dozens of times. It's like we said, it's fantastic. But I was like, I don't want to color my opinion of this one by focusing too heavily on the first one.
Yeah, same. A couple of years ago with the family, we watched the original trilogy. So they're fairly fresh on my mind, but I only revisited part 2 for this episode. This movie is written by Robert Gordon and Barry Finero. Now, Robert Gordon also has credits on Galaxy Quest just a few years before this, which is a wonderful movie. And it makes total sense to have a shared writer for the movie like Galaxy Quest, where they're both sci-fi homage and parody kind of at the same time. I think tone-wise, very close.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Galaxy Quest is I mean, I guess
Galaxy
that makes
Quest is
sense
fantastic.
for us to cover it on this show. But yeah, got a cult following. You know, we may never get a chance to talk about Galaxy Quest again. So a quick aside. I do have one criticism about that movie. It gets a lot of credit for, it's like actually a good Star Trek movie, but also kind of acknowledging how ridiculous it can be. Like it rides that line really well and it deserves all that credit. But I think it misses the mark with the fandom. It's very cool that it shows like a con before cons are like a huge thing and that plays a central, role in the plot. But what bugs me is that the diehard fans in that movie like the show because they believe it's real. And that is like how you make fun of fans of sci-fi stuff. Like we don't like the stuff because we believe it actually happens. We enjoy the fun storytelling and the world building. But there's a key scene late in the movie where they call on Justin Long's character and like, yeah, we're actually on the ship. And he's like, I knew it. I knew it was real. And it's like 2 degrees off from really nailing the fandom of what it's all about. It's similar to like when someone's like, oh, you like wrestling, it's not real. It's like, yeah, it's not why I like it, dude.
I don't watch Avengers because I think it's a documentary.
I don't know why I felt the need to knock Galaxy Quest down.
I was going to say that was a very long diatribe about how something Galaxy Quest does is not good.
It's been on my chat. Great movie though. Still go watch it. The rest of it more than makes up for it.
Galaxy Quest is the second best Star Trek movie they've made. So,
Alan Rickman, Mark Strong Award.
Yeah, probably. By Grabthar's hammer, you shall be avenged. Or by Grabthar's hammer, what a savings.
Has Alan Rickman ever been in a movie and not been the Mark Strong Award winner? My wife and daughter were watching the first Harry Potter the other day, and my wife was like, Alan Rickman, Mark Strong Award. I was like, yeah, probably.
Is he the Mark Strong in all of those, though?
I'm not an expert. I've watched them all once.
That would be the question for your wife next. Is he the Mark Strong winner in all 8 of the Harry Potter movies? Because I would probably say no on some of those.
Yeah, I'm not the biggest Harry Potter guy. Like I said, I've seen the movies once. That last one was pretty cool. But like the casting, I haven't read the books, but from what I can tell, the casting across the board is like phenomenal. So you would think Daniel Radcliffe at some point would be a Mark Strong Award winner just because that's such perfect casting and he's so synonymous with that character.
Gary Oldman's in there too. So I feel like Gary Oldman's obviously somebody that's also, I would say for 3, it's probably Gary Oldman takes it, not.
Okay.
Rickman,
I'll keep everybody updated on what friend of the show, my wife.
Let us know what, if she thinks Alan Rickman takes the Mark Strong for all 8 of them, because that's an impressive run of Mark Strong wins.
The movie's also co-written by Barry Finaro, who was a co-writer on Kingpin, which I think is one of the most underrated Farrelly Brothers movies.
Sure.
Are you not a fan of Kingpin, Andrew?
Kingpin's not a movie I've watched. Like, I don't know if I've ever truly sat down and watched Kingpin. Like, I feel like I saw it on TV a lot as a kid.
But you love Bill Murray.
I do love Bill Murray, but that doesn't mean I watch Garfield all the time.
Well, that's his one regret,
I know.
But the run of Dumb and Dumber, Kingpin, and There's Something About Mary, like that trilogy is just peak comedy. And then they retired and never made another movie. It's weird.
Yeah, it's very strange. It just to disappear so quickly is just odd.
This movie, just like the first one, is directed by Barry Sonnenfeld. This man also directed both of the Addams Family movies in the 90s. Get Shorty, which is, beyond cult classic, right?
Right.
He also directed Wild Wild West, we should acknowledge, as well as a movie called Big Trouble, starring Tim Allen, that I'm going to go on record as saying is very underrated. It's got a lot of the same appeal as Get Shorty, this long ensemble cast of lovable idiots. It's a very fun movie.
Don't know if I've rewatched Big Trouble recently. That was when like Tim Allen was like really like people were like, this guy's a leading actor. Like
it was a couple years after Galaxy Quest.
Yeah, like that
Santa
late
Claus
90s,
movies
early
in the
2000s.
90s. Yeah.
Like I guess like Home Improvement was winding down, or like it kind of run its course, and like there was this run where like, and even like beyond Disney stuff, they were like, we're gonna put him in like adult movies. We're gonna put him in real movies, and it was a good run. There was definitely some gems in there before he just started doing Toy Story all the time. But no, I love Barry Sonnenfeld. Barry Sonnenfeld is like, he did those Addams Family movies are fantastic. Like, I don't know if you guys have rewatched them recently. I don't know if we've talked about them on the show. I know we talked about the Brady Bunch movies. I don't know if we talked about
My
the
wife
Addams
loves
Family.
Adam's Family Values specifically. She
Yes.
likes them both, but we watch that every Thanksgiving. Even though she says it's her favorite Thanksgiving movie,
It's
the kids go
barely a
to
Thanksgiving movie.
the kids
It's
go
a
to summer
camp.
camp, and at summer camp they put on a play about Thanksgiving for some reason. So in her mind, that qualifies it for Thanksgiving, and I don't argue.
Sure.
It's fun to watch.
Yeah, whatever. It's all good. I'm pretty sure I put that on for Thanksgiving as well. But like Addams Family Values, that is an instance where the sequel surpasses the original as far as I'm concerned. Like the first one is good. It's a great cast. It's a great solid. Like it's one of those things that very much like the Brady Bunch movie, I probably would have watched it when it came out and been like not understood how like kind of ahead of the times it was. It's like
Yeah.
the Addams Family are this weird, dark, macabre family, but like it's in this very like just normal world. So it just really emphasizes that stark contrast between them. But with Addams Family Values, they just dial it up and like they come up with this story involving this serial killer basically that like infiltrates the family. It's just fantastic. The comedy is great. Everybody is firing on all cylinders. If you asked me who the Mark Strong for Addams Family Values was, I don't know if I could tell you because so many people in that movie.
You did say Joanne Cusack on a previous episode when
that's
it came
probably
out
true.
So
that's probably true.
I don't know. I mean, Christopher Lloyd,
he's really good. Obviously, Raul Julia is like amazing
legend,
in those
right?
movies. So is Angelica Houston. Like I said, it's one of those movies where like when you really look at everybody, you're like, everybody is so.
I mean,
good
even
in these
Christina
movies.
Ricci as Wednesday Addams is like iconic.
Those movies, fantastic. Again, if you haven't watched them ever or have not watched them in a while, I definitely go recommend revisiting. They're a lot of fun. He also very notably was a cinematographer for the Coen brothers for a long time. Did Blood Simple, Raising Arizona. Also notably, as I being a huge fan of this, shot the pilot for The Tick, starring Patrick Warburton,
who we will talk about in a moment.
But directed the pilot for that. But yeah, Barry Sonnenfeld is great. Obviously, not all hits. They're not all going to be, but the highs he hits are pretty fantastic.
He's actually in this movie in a scene late in the movie whenever Agent J and K go into a random apartment and secretly open up the wall behind the family on the couch. That is our director, Barry Sonnenfeld, sitting there on the couch with the family.
Yep.
Well, let's talk about what happens in this movie, Andrew. Picking up after the events of the first one, Agent J is still on the search for a new permanent partner. Meanwhile, an alien named Serlina crash lands on Earth looking for the light of Zartha. As it turns out, Agent J's former partner, Agent K, is the only one who knows how to find it. So now Agent J has to bring Agent K out of retirement and restore his memories with the deneuralizer so they can find the light of Zartha before the evil Serlina. Andrew, let's talk about the cast of this movie. Specifically, we're going to start with the best performance in the movie. We like to recognize the actor or actress that takes the role they are given and performs so well above the call of duty that they raise the quality of the entire movie. We recognize that person by giving them the Mark Strong Award. Andrew, who gets the Mark Strong Award for Men in Black 2?
I was a little bit surprised by this, but I'm giving it to Tommy Lee Jones for Kevin Brown / Agent K.
I agree 100%. My Mark Strong Award is also going to Tommy Lee Jones as Agent K, but I'm not surprised. I love him in this role.
Oh, yeah. I think I like him, but I just wasn't sure if anybody else is going to stand out. But just he actually gets some interesting stuff here. Like obviously when he's Kevin, before he's restored as K, he puts on like the really like he works for the post office, and so there's this scene where he's like addressing the town and he's being like a perfectly like personable post office worker. He's like, it's somebody brings in this package to ship and he's like, this isn't, this is not allowed, and he explains it all, and it's just very customer servicey, I guess, just has that voice and everything. But like when Jay shows up and starts talking to him and is like explaining to him, like, you stare up in the stars and you don't know, like, you feel like you know more about that than you do here. Like, you get that longing, you get that weird sense of like detachment that he has. But then, like, as he's going through things as Kevin, he's got this weird, like charm and like almost like personality that he's showing where like he's completely oblivious. But then, like, when he switches back to K, you see there's like the hard switch where like he's back to being K. And just a lot of interesting stuff that he gets to play with there as far as like having different levels of the performance. different nuances he gets to play with. And just, yeah, I mean, Tommy Lee Jones is great. Like I said, he's fantastic, but he actually got to stand out here a lot more than I thought, than I certainly remember him.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, anytime he's Agent K, it's great, but this one probably more than the others. He's got, like you said, shades to the character, doing things a little bit differently, but still that very dry, deadpan delivery on everything that just never gets old.
Never.
Perfect pairing with Will Smith. I mean, the buddy cop formula is nothing new, of course,
right,
but when it works, and it works so well in these movies. And it's a great cast up and down. Most of us, a lot of these casting returned from the first movie, and they were great there. They're good now, but yeah, I agree. Tommy Lee Jones.
Yep, cream of the crop.
Will Smith, of course, plays Agent J. Also fantastic.
Yeah,
they make each other better. Just going back to that buddy cop formula thing, like Tommy Lee Jones with his deadpan delivery against Will Smith with his innate charisma and comedic chops. They just work so well off each other. They make each other better. And what is there to say about Will Smith? Just one of the best ever in Hollywood. I mean,
yeah, I mean, he's a movie star in the classic sense of the term. Like it's an interesting approach here because he kind of starts out as the straight man for the first portion of this movie, kind of until we get back to Tommy Lee Jones. And then it kind of switches right back to that dynamic they had in the first film. So he gets to play that two sides of that a little bit, but he's Will Smith. I mean, what is there to say? Like, I don't want to like diminish it or like feel like there's no reason to talk about him, but like, there's nothing we can say about Will Smith that hasn't been well established already. And he's great here. He's playing Jay.
I always think it's funny. Actually, we as a family, we're watching, me and you, we're watching, we're going through the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air on HBO Max. We're almost done with that. And it's just so funny to go back and think about this man's career where it's almost like, he started off in hip hop, like in music. And then it's like, oh, well, how about a TV show that kind of takes that persona? You can kind of act right. Oh yeah, you're good at this. Well, how about we throw you in an action movie, Bad Boys, where you get to be funny. Oh, you're good there. And it just kind of snowballs. And then you get things like Ali or I Am Legend or The Pursuit of Happiness, where this man like can act his ass off. And it's almost, this sounds diminishing. I'm not trying to take away from the guy, but it's like, I know he didn't stumble into, being a leading man. It took tons of hard work, but that career trajectory is just so funny to me. You look at where he started and where he ends up. It's just insane.
Yeah, it really is kind of ridiculous to go back and look at just the steps through to when he breaks through. And it's fantastic.
Laura Flynn Boyle plays our villain, Serlina, or I should say Serlina's disguise here on Earth. Serlina is actually some sort of plant type alien that takes the form of a Victoria's Secret model that just happens to look like Laura Flynn Boyle.
Laura Flynn Boyle, obviously, like I remember her from Twin Peaks. She plays Donna Hayward on Twin Peaks, the original show. She doesn't end up reprising that role later, but obviously Wayne's World as Stacy, Wayne's slightly obsessed ex. So yeah, I mean, I'm a big fan. She's doing a pretty good job being the conniving villain here, looking for the light of Zartha.
Yeah, it's pretty fun. I mean, she makes some comments about on Earth, if you look the right way, you have power, and she makes use of her, feminine, seductive ways a lot, but also kind of is making fun of herself. Laura Flynn Boyle, very early on in a key scene, she eats this guy and has this giant stomach, right? Kind of the juxtaposition there of a Victoria's Secret model with a huge gut. It's pretty funny. It plays around with that idea in some pretty clever ways.
Yeah.
Johnny Knoxville is in this movie as Scrad / Charlie, which I didn't realize his heads had separate names until I looked at the credits. But he's an alien that is basically Serlina's henchman and does her dirty work. He's a bit of a idiot, and he has two heads. A pretty cool design, but again, Johnny Knoxville, he's billed above Rosario Dawson, which, different time. It's 2002.
I just don't think she was anybody yet.
No. But looking back on it now, it's hilarious.
Right, of course. Yeah, it's one of those things where like you look back at some of those things, how it shook out. But yeah, he's the dim-witted accomplice. That's his job here, and he does that pretty well. Yeah,
and I like this character design. There's a lot of different ways to do character, two heads, but it's got like this really long neck that comes out of his back, I guess.
Backpack.
And
Yeah, it's like through a backpack.
and the special effect is a little janky, but I like it. I kind of like that
Yeah.
it's janky. I like that clearly Johnny Knoxville did two performances, and they are just compositing his second performance onto that head. Because I don't think this would have been nearly as fun if with a CG tiny head and it's just super obvious. So like it's super obvious that it's an effect. Obviously, it's not an alien with two heads. But the fact that they're both Johnny Knoxville, I think, is more important than trying to make it look smooth. So I think they made the right decision there.
I agree. I think like, yeah, you've got, and it is because there's slight differences in the personalities to a degree. One of them's a little bit more eager to please. One of them,
Johnny
the other
Knoxville
one,
showing his range as an actor.
his range at playing varying levels of dumb people. But yeah, he's, I like that. I agree though. I think doing it that way, you make it so that it's more obvious it's Johnny Knoxville twice versus just trying to like CG a face, which just wouldn't have looked as good.
As I said, Rosario Dawson is in this movie. She plays Laura Vasquez. And spoilers, I'll just say it right now. She's the Light of Zartha. She's the thing that the evil alien is after and that our heroes are ultimately trying to protect.
Yep.
And I think she's great. I mean, she's kind of like a love interest, sort of, to Agent J, but really she's just trying to show him that maybe there's more to the world than his work, and how it's kind of like a mirror to show him like how isolating being an agent can be. So it's not so much about them having a big dramatic kiss in the end, because they don't. It's just more about what our characters learn through an innocent character like this.
Yeah, one of the trends early on is that before K comes back, Jay is basically a slave to the job. In short, like, he comes back to Zed's office and he's like, "What do you got for me?" And he's like, "Nothing. We, other people work here. You know that, right?"
I love that line. I wrote it down. Take a look out the window. You see those guys in black suits? They work here too.
Yeah, like it's played with a little bit that like he absorbs himself in the job and there's just nothing else to him. That's obviously now exacerbated a bit when he meets Laura and he feels this connection. And, I think it's reminding him, one, that, there is more to life than the job, but two, just making him feel that attachment to something that he's just been missing for so long. And like I said, there's not really a big dramatic, I don't even think he really says goodbye because of the circumstances of the finale, but it's a good little subplot. And like I said, she's great in this.
Well, Rip Torn, as you said, he plays Zed, returning from the first movie. Love this casting, love this role. What he's doing is kind of similar to Tommy Lee Jones with Agent K, in the sense that he doesn't have much of a sense of humor, or if he does, it's not the same sense of humor as Agent J. So they have good back and forth with each other because he just doesn't crack a smile at anything Agent J does. Very dry, deadpan deliveries. It's great.
Yeah, I'd say there is a humor, but it's far more of a drier humor. Just kind of him, just like, Jay will say something ridiculous and he just deadpans it. So very similar to Tommy Lee Jones, very similar, but just a little bit more levity in it, I think. But yeah, he's always great. I love him in this. He's great in Dodgeball. There's very few Rip Torn things that I've seen that I don't like him in. I remember he was in Airplane 2, I think, way back in the day, and he's been doing stuff since the 50s, 60s. So he's been around. He was around forever. I mean, I know he's since passed away, but I even remember watching him on old episodes of Alfred Hitchcock Presents from like the late 50s, early 60s. So
you remember that, Andrew? You remember watching
him? I remember watching them on television. But yeah, fantastic casting. This was one of my favorite parts of all the movies. Is just he's limited screen time, but just his interactions with with Tommy Lee Jones and Will Smith it was a perfect chemistry between the three of them.
For sure. And again, R.I.P. Rip Torn. R.I.P. Torn.
Rip Torn. Oh.
Rip Torn. Okay. Well, I'm sure we're the first to ever make that joke.
Yeah, absolutely. There's no way anybody else thought of that before now.
Fun fact, though, his dad, Elmore Torn Sr., Rip is a nickname in case you didn't know. His dad is credited with starting the tradition of eating black-eyed peas for good luck on New Year's.
Huh.
His dad worked in agriculture, and after World War II, there was abundance of black-eyed peas, and he would send like food critics across the country in newspapers a pamphlet about this old South tradition of eating black-eyed peas on New Year's to bring you good luck, which was not an old South tradition. It was something that he made up. But through this work, became a tradition that we all, well, maybe not all, but that a lot of us, participate in today. So
I know it's happened at my parents' house more than once. So
yeah,
thanks, Elder Rip.
No word on who started the cabbage tradition. Tony Shalhoub returns as Jack Jeebs. Just a super fun character in both movies, 1 and 2. He's got one scene and he's fantastic in it. It's weird to look back and think that he's only in the movie for really that long, but
yeah,
this is such a memorable character.
Right. Memorable character, memorable look, because it's like Tony Shalhoub, but like slightly different. There's enough little weird things about it that makes it stand out.
I'm pretty sure, like in kayfabe, every time he regrows a head, it's a little bit uglier. I think proportions just a little bit more off.
That makes sense. But Tony Shalhoub is obviously fantastic. Like obviously another Galaxy Quest alum.
Oh yeah,
where he's fantastic in that. Obviously Monk, the television show that he was on for many, many years.
Which Monk debuted July 12th, 2002. So literally less than 2 weeks after this movie releases in theaters, Monk starts. And
wow.
The year of Shalhoub, is what they call 2002.
And what a difference in performances.
Yeah, the character of Monk would probably hate to be around Jeebs.
Jeebs, yeah, like Jeebs is very like, he's kind of like nasty looking, like he looks kind of schemy, looks almost dirty, like hangs out in this dank antique store, whereas Monk is like all about clean, orderly, everything, and just it's very, very so if you need some range, there you go.
All right, now there's casting that I know you gotta love, Andrew, because I know you. Patrick Warburton is in this movie as Agent T, who's Jay's partner when the movie starts.
Yes.
And Patrick Warburton is being Patrick Warburton, which means it's friggin' awesome.
Yeah.
One of my notes literally just says Patrick Warburton's face is amazing.
It is. It's a great face.
Everything he does is hilarious. He's got that wonderful voice.
Yes.
Which is, I don't know if he's got like an all-American hero voice, but I don't think he's ever used it to play things straight. It's always like for comedic purposes.
Like you think about all of his iconic roles, whether it's Kronk or Seinfeld or The Tick or anybody, like all of them, it's like this weird, like aloofness, this like strange, like satire parody thing almost. Like, yeah, he's very rarely playing it straight. Like I can think of very few instances. I actually can't think of any where he does. And this is no exception. He's not in this movie very long, but it's Patrick Warburton. You can't go wrong.
But like Agent J asks him if he ever looks at the stars, he's like, yes. No. Like just so simple.
Yeah, like at one point he's like, is this a test? Yeah. All right, I'm ready.
Yeah. The note about his face was like, you ever look at the stars? Like, test. And like he's like with his whole face, he's like looking at the stars. Like,
I need you people to know that Chris right now just did a facial impression of Patrick Warburton. You all can't see it, so I have no idea why he did it, but it was very entertaining for me to watch.
It was very funny.
Yes. Some fun cameos. I mean, we don't need to spend too much time on them, but obviously Martha Stewart shows up, I guess outing herself as an alien.
Yeah, I guess that's the implication. That she's like on the monitor at MIIB headquarters.
And Michael Jackson was in there too. But the one that I thought was funny is the intro of the movie is this kind of like aged show that dramatizes conspiracy type stuff. That's like our opening of the movie, and it's narrated and like presented by Peter Graves, who is notably from the original Mission Impossible. He played Jim Phelps, played by John Voight in the movie with Tom Cruise. But he also shows up in Addams Family Values doing a very similar kind of thing where he's like a presenter on like a true crime show. And so I just find it interesting that Barry Sonnenfeld apparently just keeps bringing him back to play the same character. Essentially,
he read the script. He's like, oh, okay, I got a guy for this.
I absolutely have somebody for this. But yeah, I always like Peter Graves, obviously from the first Airplane is where I think people may know him from as the main pilot. But yeah, I always like seeing him in his late stage where he kind of really leaned into the comedy stuff.
So also, I don't know if this is a cameo or not. Nick Cannon is in the movie. Or one
Yes.
quick scene, but this is 2002. He's not. I mean, even now, Nick Cannon's not the biggest name out there, but this is like the very beginning of his career. So I don't know if this was just a small part that kind of feels like a cameo now because it's so little. But this is actually the same year as Drumline, which Drumline, not a huge hit, but that was kind of his first notable thing. So pre-Drumline Nick Cannon, is that
Yeah.
a cameo?
Yeah, I don't think it's a cameo. I think it's just a bit part because like before this, it was all like television stuff. Like he was on all that. He was in Keenan and Kel. He was on, the Nick Cannon show was going on at the same time. So like then it's really after Drumline that I think like he starts doing a lot of stuff. So like to this point, I think it is just a bit part. I don't think it's a cameo. So we are ruling on the side of bit part, not cameo.
Okay. Well, Andrew, let's jump into the movie and talk about our favorite scenes in this movie. And of course, guys, you know what we're going to do. We're going to start with the best scene of the movie, with our favorite scene of the movie. Andrew, in your opinion, when is this movie firing on all cylinders? What's the best scene in the movie?
I think the best scene in the movie is when, because when Tommy Lee Jones gets deneuralized, he still has no idea what the light of Zartha is. He still has no clue what any of that is. And I think the moment that I actually liked a lot was the scene where it all comes back to him, where he kind of puts all the clues together and he figures out exactly what he's supposed to watch. And it's that same tape from the beginning of the movie. He finds it, meets up with David Cross's Newton, who's supposedly the same character he plays in the first one. They're both called Newton. I don't know if they're
Really?
twins or if they're, I have no idea if the implication is
I
they're
just
the same guy,
assumed
but
it was like a recast thing, because one thing this movie does, we'll have our tone conversation later, is kind of, it's an homage to like B movies and horror movies and sci-fi movies of the 50s, which would recast people inexplicably. So I kind of assumed it was that. I did not realize that it had the same name though. So
yeah,
that's
his name is Newton in both movies. But either way, so he puts on this tape. Like I said, it's Peter Graves narrating what is essentially the Zartha Serlina conflict that leads to this situation unfolding. And that's when like it all jogs back for Tommy Lee Jones, and you kind of get the realization that he's essentially doing the same thing that Jay is now, where like he got personally involved in the situation. But you get these these odd flat, because what's happening is we're seeing this like of these events on the screen, and Tommy Lee Jones is like, that's not what it was. And like it's being juxtaposed with what really happened, and like just seeing kind of the dark and the bleak aspect of all of it. And Tommy Lee Jones, I like, the way they de-aged him is they just gave him different hair. Like it's just, he's got like a flat top instead.
Yeah.
But just like, I liked it a lot because you see some emotion from Tommy Lee Jones. Like you see that he had this attachment to what was happening as it all comes back to him. And it's a smaller thing. It's not a very long scene, but just that stuff was all really working for me here with Kay's kind of disparate memories, and like as he regained them, like just all the scenes where he's like got that detachment that he's trying to figure out like where he fits in, all that really worked for me. But that scene there where like you see his attachment, obviously how he felt about obviously the Queen of Zartha, who they sort of imply there might have been something there, they sort of they dance around it, but all that worked for me a lot. And it's kind of culminating in that scene where you kind of get his version of what really happened and kind of how he felt about it and his attachment to all of it. I liked it a lot.
I agree. It's very good. It kind of culminates, he remembers everything, and he actually has a tear come down his cheek. I mean, you don't expect that from Agent K in these movies to reach that level of emotion. So like we kind of said, giving him the Mark Strong Award, there's a lot of layers to the character we get to see here. So yeah, great scene. And I love the juxtaposition because the tape is a very, very almost Plan 9 from Outer Space level reenactment of
it's very, very cheap, very, very like purposely low budget.
Yeah, when they show like his memories, like what really happened, it's black and white, it's raining, it's very hazy, and so yeah, it's very serious. So it is that fun juxtaposition. And yeah, he was in love, personally involved with the Queen, and this movie is about saving her daughter. And you do the math on the age, and Jay outright asks him if he's the dad, and we don't get an answer.
Yeah, Jay is kind of like, so Lorana is her mother, and who is her father? And Kay is just like, we got to go back to MIB. It's in shambles. So, I mean, again, I feel like that's sending a pretty clear message.
Sure.
And at one point, when Kay is talking to Laura, he calls her baby at one point. Like, it's just a real quick thing where I'm just like, that was the moment where I was like, oh, wait, now that's coming back to me. And so, yeah, there's a little few hints there. And again, that's something I think they handled really, really well. But yeah, that ultimate like scene where he pieces it all together, that was definitely working for me on all levels.
It is a great scene. Not what I wrote down as my favorite scene. However, my favorite scene does heavily involve Tommy Lee Jones as Agent K because he's so wonderful. My favorite scene starts 26 minutes into the movie. I know that because I checked the time, because that is whenever Tommy Lee Jones first appears in the movie. In a 88-minute movie, we go 26 minutes without Tommy Lee Jones. Just pretty crazy to look back and think about.
Yeah.
So it's the post office scene. Like you said, the character he's playing as Kevin is just so fun. The juxtaposition of the agent we know and love from that first movie being almost, reduced to this simple life at the post office is fun because he's still himself. He's still got the deadpan delivery, but it's somehow just more goofy and lighthearted. He's got the shorts on, which is just funny to see.
With high socks, though.
Yeah. But I love the scene for those reasons. And this is whenever we first start getting into, him realizing that there's part of his life he doesn't know. We find out that the cover that he was given is that he was in a coma for a long time. Because Agent J tells him, the coma was a cover. You're actually a secret agent. And obviously, our boy Kevin here is like, how would you know about the coma? So to make his point, Agent J takes him to the back where all the other postal employees are working and reveals to Agent K that they are actually all aliens who've been keeping an eye on him and keeping him safe. And the reveal of each alien is so fun. First off,
yes,
we got the late, great Biz Markie. R.A.P. passed away earlier this year, way too young. But he does what he's known for. He needs a beatboxing alien, which I love that casting. I don't know if the script said beatboxing alien and they were like, oh, we'll get Biz Markie. If so, that's perfect. Or if they cast Biz Markie and made him a beatboxing alien, that's also perfect. So however this came to be is so much fun. We get Will Smith and Biz Markie beatboxing back and forth with each other. Like that's awesome.
It is.
So he communicates with Biz Markie's character, and Biz Markie tells everybody to reveal themselves. And each little alien is just fun and unique. And quick aside, quick tangent here. This is the love-hate relationship thing I have with sci-fi movies involving aliens, is that usually like 30% of the population, this is like Star Wars, any kind of movie has aliens, 30% to 50% are humans, right?
Right.
And the rest are aliens. So we see a ton of humans, and then we see like one alien from these other races. Sometimes there's like the Klingons in Star Trek, where Star Trek's pretty good about having entire races. But otherwise, it's just these one-off characters, which doesn't really make any sense to me that there's all these humans, but just tiny pockets of individual aliens. Now, the flip side of that, hashtag positivity podcast, I'm not ragging on the movie. It's fun to show different creature and character designs, and that outweighs the negative here. So I tend to look past it because each one of these aliens in the mailroom is super cool. There's one that looks like Joey Ramone, which that's enough to be an alien, right? But he takes off his wig, and he's actually got a tiny head under that Joey Ramone wig. There's the alien that's inside of the sorting machine. We find out that it's not actually a machine. It's just a box that holds this guy with a bunch of arms that likes to smoke and throw the mail out to where it goes. There's the guy that takes off his torso and his legs have like a little alien piloting him. Just really fun, really cool designs. And most of it, I'm trying to think of the scene, is all practical.
Yeah.
I mean, Biz Markie, it's all practical.
Yeah, that beatboxing ain't CGI, man.
I think just the alien with all the arms that's sorting the mail is the only one that's like CG, and the rest are like puppets and animatronics. And I'm a sucker for that stuff. I love it.
Oh yeah, this movie's full. Like a lot of the aliens are practical. Like when they're in MIB, when they're everywhere, even with MIB's like weird product placement stuff it's got going on. There's like a Sprint store in MIB. There's a Burger King in MIB. But I don't know how that works.
I don't know. At the how do they get paychecks?
I don't know. That's my question. Like, are there MIB people that just go through Burger King training?
But then they got a license. They still got a license Burger King. So, like, does the CEO of Burger King know about the MIB? Do they?
How high did this go, man?
Is the king an alien? No. So the end of the post office scene, though, is Jay just tells him, like, look, if you want to know the truth, you'll come with me. And Jay goes and gets to the car. And then Tommy Lee Jones, Agent K, of course, joins him. And he says, let's see what you got here, Chief, which is just a really fun callback to that first movie because Agent J hates all those nicknames like Sport, Chief,
Slick,
Big Guy,
Ace, yeah,
Slick.
all of them.
Yeah. So even though he doesn't have his memories, he's still treating him that way. It was really fun.
Yeah, I like that because it's a little thing that says that this is not just like Tommy Lee Jones does not just treat Will Smith that way. It's literally how he is. It's just that's how he talks to other people.
Those aliens at MIB headquarters are always fun. Any of these movies, anytime about MIB headquarters, because it's almost kind of like an airport feel. I feel like that's what
Like
they're
a
basing it
customs
on.
type thing. Yeah.
Yeah. Always checking in stuff. So you've got just tons of different races. Background characters that have no lines, that will have no characterization, but they spent obviously a lot of work on the makeup and prosthetics to design them. So it's almost like Where's Waldo, just trying to find all the cool little characters in MIB headquarters. There are, I assume they're aliens. They're humanoid, but they're walking around MIB headquarters in black leather, like a leather bodysuit, walking on their hands and feet and bobbing their head back and forth in a very unnatural way. I think they're just performers. It's got to be the same guys from the Schism music video for Tool. If you've ever seen that, but that's how they walk around on their hands and feet, and they bob their head. It's pretty unsettling looking, especially in the music video. But they're doing the exact same thing in this movie. I tried to like Google it and see if like these are the same people. Not a lot of information out there, but I'm willing to bet on it.
I'm not as informed. I'm not that passionate about it, but
I just love that they don't even like put prosthetics on them or anything. They're like, the thing you can do is pretty freaky. Like they'll believe you're an alien.
Yeah, if you just act unsettling enough, people will start thinking you're an alien.
So the movie opens after that video, the reenactment video we see a clip of, with an alien spaceship crashing on Earth, and I love they have some fun.
This is so good.
Forced perspective stuff where it looks like this giant ship is about to crash into Central Park. And it hits the dirt and dirt flies up everywhere. But then a dog walks up and you see it's actually a tiny little ship.
It's like a foot tall.
Yeah. Love that stuff. That's where Serlina arrives and she turns into Laura Flynn Boyle. I love that transformation scene because it's really neat. Like it's just a little plant and all these vines keep coming out and growing. And then the second she turns into Laura Flynn Boyle, a mugger comes on the screen and puts a knife to her neck.
Yes.
He had to have seen this happen. He's like, I'm going to wait and wait for this plant to fully transform. And then I'm going to take her money.
I had that exact moment. Of just like, how did you not see what was happening there? Yes, this is then the mugger that she eats to give herself the giant belly later.
Very good.
The scene where Kay remembers, like, because what happens is they go to this, MIB gets invaded. They can't use the official neuralizer, so they get flushed, literally flushed, and they jump out on a street. And Tommy Lee Jones is like, or Kevin, whatever, is reaching his limit with this. He's kind of like, you need to start giving me some answers or I'm going to leave. And so they go to Jeeves. This is how we segue into Jeeves, where they use his kind of bootleg deneuralizer, where he's like, the plans leaked on the internet a few years ago. So Jeeves has this like
Pee Wee Herman looking
bootleg version using like all these parts from his shop. But because he's using the old software, Kay doesn't get his memory back immediately. So like he uses it, it finishes, and he gets up and he's like, all right, I'm leaving. And so Kevin's just done. He's like, I'm finished. This is over. It's not done anything.
Before he walks away, though, it's a fun scene where he gets knocked down on his back. Agent J and Jeeves look over him and he blows Jeeves' head off. So Jay's like, all right, you're back. And he's like, no, I don't remember anything. He's like, well, how'd you know his head was going to go back? He goes, it grows back.
Yeah.
So good.
Pretty good. Yes. So he gets up and walks away. And then obviously at that moment, Serlena's thugs show up to fight to get Kay, basically, because she realizes Kay is kind of the missing piece here. But he walks outside and he has this scene where like he looks up and he sees like Orion in the sky with Orion's belt and everything. But then he just starts looking at all these things around him and he sees that so many of them are aliens. Like the post office guy has a tail and like the person pushing a cart has something in the cart. And like he sees those two guys on the bike. It's weird. I don't know what they were supposed to be, but they're on the bike in like light up suits. And
One of my favorite lines is right here because he's about to step on this bug and decides not to. And this little roach bug looks up at him and goes, "Damn decent of you."
damn decent. Yeah, in like an English accent.
I love that line delivery. It's so funny.
And then he just looks and he's like, "Don't mention it." But then it like all clicks for him. And like it's just a cool little scene where like he looks around and he actually sees what's around him. He sees what's actually happening, and then it culminates in the bug thing, and that's when it all comes back, and he goes back down and helps Will Smith fight off all these aliens. But just a cool little, again, just all those moments with Tommy Lee Jones in this movie just all really work for me.
So good. Yeah, I love that whole scene with Jeeves, though. Like I said, I love the design of his deneuralizer. I was trying to find all the different, there was like an iron in there, an old monitor, all the different stuff that he used to build it. But whenever the goons arrive, because Kay storms off and Jeeves like feels bad. He's like, it takes a minute. Trust me. And he's talking with Jay and he's like, "I hope this doesn't affect our friendship. All those years of loyalty and trust, respect for one another." And then all the goons bust in. He goes, "He's right there. He's over there." And
He immediately sells them out.
So good.
So good. But yeah, that's Tony Shalhoub. And again, we said he's fantastic in this movie. If he had more screen time, he's very much a possible Mark Strong Award winner.
Speaking of cameos that aren't really cameos because they weren't known actors at the time, Scully from Brooklyn Nine-Nine is an agent in this movie. When they arrive at the pizza place, one of the agents is the actor that plays Scully on Brooklyn Nine-Nine. He has like one line.
Yeah, that's always fun.
That's whenever Frank the Pug is Jay's partner after he neuralizes Agent T in the beginning. That opening action set piece where we meet Jeff the Worm is so much fun. I mean, for one, we get the great Patrick Warburton, and they're talking to this little flower sticking out of a sewer gate. And Jay, almost doing like a good cop, bad cop thing where Jay is trying to be like, "Hey, what are you doing out here, man?" And Patrick Warburton is like being mean,
like kicking it and grabbing it. And just like,
we find out that this flower is actually coming out of the head of a giant worm that breaks out of the ground and travels through the subway system. Andrew, if I were to tell you that the character of Jeff, which is the worm's name, reminded me of Wiggler, would you know what I was talking about? What if I told you it reminded me of the caterpillar from Super Mario World?
Yes, I would know what you mean by saying the caterpillar from Super Mario World.
Full disclosure, I had to look up his name. I didn't know his name, Wiggler. But if in that Super Mario Bros. Movie where they tried to make all the characters like quote unquote realistic and gritty, if they had tried to adapt Wiggler for that movie, it would look like Jeff in Men in Black 2.
Yeah, that's. I'm annoyed at how accurate that summation is.
But there's a fun action set piece through the subway system where Agent Jay is riding Jeff, and eventually Jay gets thrown onto a subway car. And I love the whole action scene here, but it culminates with Jeff eating half of the car, and then finally he threatens to kill Jeff, and Jeff stops pursuing him, and we get this awesome shot of Agent J on the back of a subway car that's like half eaten, and it just slowly pulls away from the camera. It's just one of my favorite shots in the movie. It's so cool.
Yeah, that whole sequence cool. But yeah, and then obviously that's contrasted with then the comedic shot of like this half destroyed subway car like slowly pulling into the station, and then his explanation for them is like, "Enjoy our new, smaller, more energy efficient subway cars."
So good. Every time I watch this movie with like I said, I watched all three movies with my daughter a couple of years ago, and man, she was 8 or 9 at the time. And afterwards, she said her favorite part was that Agent J, anytime he neuralizes somebody, gives people happy memories. It's like a running thing throughout the movies. He's always like, "Yeah, get married, do this. Energy efficient car," like you said. Always has like a fun, optimistic memory to give him.
I like when they neuralize the family in the apartment, what Kay says. He's like, "You did not just see a bunch of men in your apartment trying to take guns out of a secret hidden room. Also cherish and love each other forever."
That's nice.
That is.
At one point, they use the internet in the car. And I genuinely can't tell if this was a joke at the time or accurate to the time, but you get a quick shot of like the web browser and it's got the old eBay logo. It's got like pop-up ads. And I can't tell if that's like a joke about old internet or if 2002, like that was old internet at the time. I feel like it's maybe like a 90s joke, like a 90s internet on I couldn't quite, it's funny.
Yeah,
I couldn't quite tell how that was supposed to read though.
I
Looking
can't
back
either.
on the movie now.
I really don't know, and that's one of those things where I'm like, would that have been considered cutting edge at the time? Like, I don't know.
Having a web browser in the car.
Yeah,
I
because
guess
like
so.
I don't think you did. You still kind of don't.
Speaking of cool alien designs, one of the big bad guys in this movie, one of the later fights in the movie, is named Jara. And he looks like he's this really tall alien with a big trench coat. But when it's time to fight Agent J, he takes off that coat and he's got little clones of himself, all riding their own personal little UFO,
Yeah,
basically.
flying saucer kind of thing. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a really fun fight though. And just again, a cool design. This one's definitely a mix of some practical and CG, and they blend it perfectly just to make a super creative alien fight.
Also, the subway, or not the subway aliens, the train station aliens. There's a scene where as they're putting together the clues on what's happening, it's really funny because what happens is they put together this picture back at the pizza place, and in the picture, Tommy Lee Jones is pointing off to like the right, which if you look right to the right of the picture, there's a key hanging on the wall. But Will Smith is like, you're pointing over here, which points over here, which he's
Like
running
this
all over
whole
the pizza
scavenger
place.
hunt. Yeah.
And meanwhile, Tommy Lee Jones is like, it's this key. But they go back to the train station where the key goes to a locker. And there's literally this like alien civilization living inside this locker who treat Kay as their like gracious leader because he gave them a watch or something. But it gives them a bunch of clues. But just that idea of an alien race living within a locker, I think is just another cool, like thinking outside the box kind of thing. When you're thinking about aliens, you're always like, you're always assuming they're these giant, massive things, but just putting them in a locker where they actually like live, I just thought was a unique little twist. And obviously they had a kind of unique looking design. They're obviously important to the next step that leads them to the video store. But again, I just thought that was a cool look, cool little, and just a cool aesthetic to just thinking outside the box, doing something a little bit different.
And those are, again, to go back to this, those like practical aliens. They're like people in furry suits, basically.
Yep.
Now, I'm guessing you were reminded of the same thing as I was watching that scene. In particular, at the end of that scene, when they all rush off to the little strip joint in the back.
You're thinking Beetlejuice, aren't you?
Exactly. Yeah. It's such a, anytime I see a tiny to scale strip joint, I think of Beetlejuice.
Yep.
Again, that fight with Jara, though, the flying ones. During that fight, Rosario Dawson is strapped in like to the spaceship.
Yeah.
And there's a timer counting down before it launches her. And so he's got to defeat Jara and go save her before that happens. And so he, of course, wins. And he's making his way over. And at the last second, he disarms it. And then he unbuckles Rosario Dawson as she gets out. And friend of the show, my wife, is like, wait a minute, why did she just unbuckle herself? And it's like, you're watching the movie wrong.
Yeah. I liked that little callback though to the idea that like he's in no rush because he knows he has enough time. Because like that's contrasted to the first movie where like they have like an hour to stop those aliens and he's like going crazy because he's like, we only have an hour to do this. And Tommy Lee Jones is like, there's always an hour, there's always an Archelian death ray, there's always something happening. But the biggest point is, it kind of instills him, it's like you have to be calm, you have to approach it correctly. So here it was kind of fun to just see him like realize I've got enough time, I don't need to run over there all crazy, and just stops it casually. Doesn't take, not sweating it, not anything. I thought that was a cool little.
That is fun. I didn't even put the pieces together on that, but yeah, that is a nice callback to that. Some growth to the character.
Yeah.
As I said, even though once he's with Agent K, you still get the old dynamic. He has grown as an agent, and he knows his stuff now, as opposed to being a rookie like last time.
Yeah.
We get a lot of fun stuff going towards the climax of this movie. First off, we got a new MIB car that now transforms into like a full-on flying ship that really fun normalizes people in the street as it flies over them. Again, more fun cameos. You got Will Smith's actual kids on the street there get neuralized. And the control for this ship is very clearly a PlayStation controller. Like they're not trying to hide it. It's just a spray painted PlayStation controller. And I thought to myself, as Tommy Lee Jones is flying. Andrew, do you think this is the only time Tommy Lee Jones has ever held a PlayStation controller?
Yes.
How would you be willing to bet on it?
I think so. Yes. I absolutely believe that it is. Yeah, I that popped out. It was one of those things where I was like, it just reminded me of Ghostbusters 2, where they go to pilot the Statue of Liberty, and he's like, "All right, pilot controls are ready," and he just drops down like a Super or an NES Advantage, which was just a giant Nintendo controller, and I was like, "Yep." In that case, they were definitely like implying they used one to do this, but like it's one of those moments where I'm like, "Yep, we're just not hiding it whatsoever."
The end of the movie, they destroy Serlina, who is now in a full-on plant form. She kills Jeff, which is very sad. And she's just this giant plant. They use their classic big guns to blow it up before it has a chance to reach Rosario Dawson, who's on her way off the planet. And the explosion it looks like fireworks, and it's the shape of the MIB logo, like the atomic logo MIB, which is really fun. And then I love this last little bit where Jay is like, well, the whole city just saw this. And Agent K uses the Statue of Liberty, which in his torch actually has a giant neuralizer to neuralize the entire city. It's one of those things like, think about too much, it's not going to make a lot of sense, but it's fun. So who cares?
But you're not allowed in the torch of the Statue of Liberty anymore, Chris. So I'm just saying, it's blocked off. You can't go up there.
Well, now we know why.
Exactly. That's my point. Yes.
Okay, I get it now. Ever since the X-Men incident, you're not allowed to go up there.
You're just asking for trouble.
And then the movie's got this it's not a post-credit scene because they haven't right away, but it's got a post-credits feel.
Yeah.
It gets a little weird. Rip Torn goes full like Patches O'Houlihan and gets a little creepy. He's talking about one of his lovers about when our bodies were intertwined in the positions of the Kama Sutra. It's like, what the hell are we doing here?
What are you talking about? And then like, of course, like it's very, very strange. It's like an odd, like left turn for like everybody involved. Because they're all trying to like help Will Smith get like over the fact that Laura had to leave the planet. And so like Tommy Lee Jones is like, if you want to talk about it, and then like Frank and Zed start talking about like their weird stories. Stuff. Yeah. And then like ultimately he's like, and then they like move the aliens from the locker at Grand Central Station into his locker at MIB because, give him some perspective. And it's so strange. And then it culminates with a moment that I guess is like meant to emulate the end of the first one, where like we pan back from Earth and we find out that it's just a galaxy and some kid's marble. Whereas in this one, it turns out all of Earth is apparently in some locker in an alien train station.
Yeah, we're probably not supposed to think about it too much.
Probably not. Just one of those things where you pan back and you're supposed to be like, oh yeah, it's a little weird. But
Andrew, this movie is from, like we've said, 2002, the early 2000s, which we've covered a few movies from this era so far, and have found that there's always some telltale signs about the era of which they come from. Andrew, I've got the top 4 ways to know this movie is from 2002. You ready?
Can I try to guess one of them?
Okay, go ahead. It's one of them.
Is Johnny Knoxville one of them?
We'll make that. Yeah, that's number 5. Number 5, Johnny Knoxville's in the movie.
Okay,
all right. Above Rosario Dawson. Hey, early 2000s. All right, number 4. This line, spoken by Agent K. Krelons are the Backstreet Boys of the universe.
Yep.
2002. Number 3, I can be Agent M. Michael Jackson wants to be Agent M. We've got world famous Michael Jackson, who is in a rare place late in his career where he can cameo in a family friendly movie without being too problematic, which that was kind of hit or miss throughout the latter half of his career. But 2002 specifically, it was okay. My daughter, fun fact, did not know who he was, which is insane to think about. Like how there's possibly never been someone more famous when he was alive, but now I'm not sure if we're all teaching our kids who Michael Jackson was.
I think the times are a little different, I think.
Number 2, whenever Agent J leaves Frank the Pug alone in the car, when he returns, the radio is blasting "Who Let the Dogs Out?"
Yep.
2002. And the number 1 way that this movie is from 2002, during our final fight, Agent J tells Serlina he's going to lay the smackdown on her candy ass.
Oh, oh goodness.
Directly
goodness.
quoting The Rock, the wrestler, not the superstar
The
that we
actor.
know.
And those are the top 5 reasons this movie takes place in the early 2000s.
Well, all in all, I had fun with the movie. I think, if you separate it from the first movie, it's a lot easier to have fun because the tone bounces around a bit. Where that
Yeah.
first movie is so it nails such a specific tone and it's so fun. Whereas this one, like I said, they do a little bit of like the homage to B movies, which sometimes feels out of place. There's some really odd choices with like Agent K and Zed. Both have a moment where they fly up in the air and kick somebody in the face, doing this weird kung fu that's unexplained. And like that kind of stuff is fine, but when you put it up against everything else or the tone that we're expecting after watching that first movie, it starts to feel a little weird.
Right. Just a little too over the top sometimes, a little too jokey. And it's weird too, because even Jay, I think it's a little inconsistent because like I said, in that first 20 minutes or so, he's playing it pretty straight. And then it like once Tommy Lee Jones is back, it hard switches back into the old dynamic basically. And so that's a little uneven as well. Even though I think Will Smith handles both extremely well, there's no issue with it. It is just a bit of a hard switch.
Yeah, and like I'm sure there's some movie about aliens, some comedy where a Balchinian would be funny.
I don't know if it's this one.
I don't know if it's this one. Andrew, usually at this point in the episode, I like to ask you how the movie functions as an adaptation of the comic book because the Men in Black movies are technically based on comic books. However, these are, I think, 6 total issues published by Malibu Comics, which no one had ever heard of before it became a movie. So it's almost like they springboarded from an idea and created a universe with that first movie. So the storylines aren't exactly one for one with anything you might have read in a comic book.
No. There are definitely things that like cross over. There are concepts like obviously the neuralizing, that's from the comics. The comics are a little bit more open-ended. Like it's not just aliens either. It's really open to anything. We're talking monsters like vampires, zombies, werewolves type stuff. Like really, it's like the Men in Black are basically the guys that handle like anything, like any conspiracy, anything that you don't want the world to know about, that's there. And they're also not necessarily the good guys all the time. You find out there's a twist in the comic that they might not be as noble in their pursuits as you may think they are. So as an adaptation, it really like it seems weird to say like as an adaptation. It's like you said, it was 6 issues over like 2 years. Like it's not something that really like ZJK, those are all names from the comic, but like they don't really line up with any of what you see in the movie really. And it almost feels weird to say how does it function as an adaptation, because it certainly is just taking the concept. Like it's like, here's an interesting concept, the idea of a hidden organization that keeps all this stuff down low. Limiting it to aliens, I think, is the right choice as far as limiting the scope and also trying to kind of avoid comparisons to things like Ghostbusters. And so, yeah, I think it was definitely something where they're like, here's a concept that we kind of like, here's some things in it that we like, but let's put some new wheels on it and see how it does. And so I've only read like one of the issues. It's not something that's easily available at this point, but the movies are obviously doing, I think, a very different goal, and I think they succeed at it pretty well.
Yeah, definitely. Like we said already, especially that first movie, but the second one, there's still plenty of fun to be had. At the very least, you've got Will Smith and Tommy Lee Jones, as you said, at the height of their powers, crushing it, and they've got that great dynamic that lasts through all 3 of those original movies, and they're a great time. It's funny because Men in Black 2 is one of those movies that when it first hit DVD, Blu-ray, whatever, probably didn't sell as well as the first one, but now they package like the MIB trilogy or MIB collection. So it's like everybody's like, oh, I'll pick that up. And that happens so often. Like I wouldn't own Mission Impossible 2, except that it comes in a bundle with the
Yeah.
other ones, right? And you end
Right.
up buying these movies that maybe you're not super enthusiastic about because it's all boxed together in a collection.
No, I agree.
The
That
Indiana
happens a lot.
Jones 4K came out earlier this year, right? And I saw a lot of jokes about having 4 movies when it should have been 3 or whatever. But you're gonna buy it. You're gonna want.
Yeah.
You might not
You
even
want 'em
ever
all.
watch it, but you're gonna own it.
Yeah, and it's something where like I think, and I actually remember really liking 3. I haven't watched 3 in a long time, so maybe I'll watch it tonight after we're done here. But and I don't know if I've watched International all the way through.
Not yet,
Don't.
Andrew.
Not yet.
Not
but
yet. We might.
We may
We
just
might do
indeed do that. But yeah, it is kind of surprising. I mean, in a way, it's a weird parallel to Ghostbusters in a lot of ways, because Ghostbusters is this thing that they kept trying to make a thing again, and Ghostbusters 2 is 89. The reboot is 16. The new follow-up sequel is this year. So it's even Ghostbusters is something that, like, for a long time, they weren't sure how to leverage it. They really they had this, 10-year period kind of where Ghostbusters was this phenomenon, and then they just didn't know how to keep it going. And Men in Black just feels like it's something too that's just kind of struggled to keep finding if there's a way to keep going. And at the end of the day, maybe Men in Black really just kind of was lightning in a bottle, where it's like you just had the perfect storm of a cast, a concept, a vision, and it all came together perfectly. And who knows? But all I know is that this one, especially, like, when you don't put it in the shadow of the original, especially, which I realize it's difficult to do. Like, it's obviously a sequel to that movie. It's difficult to separate it, but
It's a little easier to do that now in the year 2021
sure.
than when the movie first comes out and you see it in theaters and you're like, I just want more of Men in Black. So time has definitely helped enjoy this movie, I think.
Because I think that makes it a lot easier to just it even almost similar to Ghostbusters 2. Like, is Ghostbusters 2 reinventing the wheel of the Ghostbusters concept? No, but you're watching all these guys back as these characters in a similar situation, and there's just a fun comfort in that, like, to just see that chemistry and see those performances. And I think that absolutely applies here, where, like, you're getting Tommy Lee Jones and Will Smith, and maybe they're just riffing on the original concept, but there's still a lot of fun to have with that.
Well put. And I think that does it for us this week. That's Men in Black 2. One thing I don't think I've ever said on the podcast is our podcast comes out on Tuesdays. It comes out every week. But if you want to know what day of the week, it's Tuesday. So if you subscribe to our podcast, when you wake up on Tuesdays, you can expect to have a new episode of Best of the Rest, or wherever you listen to your podcast. Of course, it comes out on 2 a.m. where we live. So I don't know if you're somewhere else in the world. If you're in Australia, it's dropping in the afternoon. You can consider our podcast some afternoon delight for you on Tuesday.
Why'd you have to do that?
Who doesn't like some hashtag PP in the afternoon, Andrew?
Don't go full Zed on me, man.
Positivity.
Don't do it. Stop it. Stop it.
Andrew, did you know that if someone reviews our podcast on Apple Podcast, that we're going to read it on the episode? Did you know that we do that?
Yes.
Okay. Well, hopefully everyone knows that. Whatever it is you're writing that review, you can bet that we are going to read it. So please take some time, go on to Apple Podcast and leave a review for this podcast. And I always ask you to go one step farther. Leave a review for every podcast that you listen to. It's a nice, fun, free, easy way for you to support the podcast that you enjoy. We love putting out this content and we do it for free. And that's just one way you can help us out with the algorithms and help us get found. And I've been making this plea on every episode, and a lot of you guys have left reviews, but obviously I've got to take it one step further. So I'm going to start calling out listeners one at a time, every episode by name. So Mike, leave a review for Best of the Rest, please, on Apple Podcast. This week, we're asking you, Mike.
Yes, Mike, leave us a review, please.
Remember, maybe not every movie is great,
but all movies have greatness.
Thank you to Mark Benavides for singing our theme song. Follow him on Instagram at NotThatMarkAnthony. Thanks to Mitch of Depressed to Impressed for the music. Check him out on YouTube and Twitter. If you enjoyed this episode, please share it with a friend. It's the only way we're going to grow, and we certainly appreciate it. And follow us on social media at BOTRcast. Thank you. Anything recorded in this conversation can and will be used against you, just FYI.
Just remember, if you're a cop, you have to reveal that beforehand. Otherwise, it's illegal.
Not true.
Absolutely not true.
Yeah.
I
It's
just
the
always thought that
dumbest
was
thing
funny.
in the world that
You have to tell me you're a cop, otherwise it's entrapment. Nope, that's not what
8
entrapment
years of
is.
undercover work blown because they asked me if I was a cop.
That'd be a good short film.
Okay. This is my impression. Listen for the episode. Christopher Lloyd. Is it Chris Lloyd? Christopher Lloyd. What's he like to get billed as? But Chris Lloyd.
It's Christopher Lloyd usually.
Christopher Lloyd. And an Addams Family as Uncle Fester. I don't know if he come across on the mic. This is my impression of Christopher Lloyd. Oh. That noise. That's it.
You're right, though. Yeah, you're right.
He works that into every line somehow.
Pretty much. It's always. That was good. That was good.
All right.
Your very niche. Your niche impressions continue.